Hello everyone, we are the group 5 and we will discuss the chapters 9 and 10. But let us first discuss the chapter 9, which is the successful employee communication. Learning objectives. First is to explain the concept of emotional intelligence, describe the four types of communication in the workplace, explain the various communication styles and identify your own style, and lastly, to define nonverbal communication and describe the importance of it in an HR setting.
Communication. Communication from a human resource management perspective is the process of transferring information, ideas, and emotion from one person to another or group effectively. Communication entails verbal and nonverbal aspects of communication, which include body expression, tone, and messages in writing. Communication at work helps in managing relations, is always involved in the conflict resolution process, and motivates workers. Misunderstandings usually arise from miscommunication or conflicts. Elements of communication. Clarity and intent. Making your purpose clear behind the message reduces miscommunication. Body language. Many nonverbal signals like crossed arms or facial expressions may struggle with feelings more powerfully than words. Direct communication. Face-to-face communication rather than indirect means like email or blog would minimize miscommunication. Management styles. Various styles of communication or management can bring about misalignment if understood or adjusted poorly. Feedback. It is good to give feedback but in a manner that does not infringe on the roles and responsibilities of others, making them feel belittled. Emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is crucial for delivering effective communication and overall success in personal and professional life. Unlike IQ, which does not change, EI can be increased. Perhaps the most well-known researcher in EI is Daniel Goleman, who provides 5 important domains of EI. These 5 domains can be summarized as knowing your emotions. Your ability to know your own emotion helps you in your communications because your emotions may modify both your nonverbal behaviors and your verbal responses. Managing your emotions. Understanding and controlling this boiling pot of your emotion avoids overreactions, thus implying interactions. Motivating yourself. Self-motivation can work wonders in achieving success in both personal and professional life. Recognizing and understanding others' emotions. The potential to realize others' emotion by mere body language or any other feel is the part of being empathetic toward them and developing more functional communication. Managing relationship that will help in developing much healthier relationships and avoiding a lot of conflict. Communication direction. Effective in-company communication is very instrumental to organizational success. Companies with good communication system find their employee more loyal, motivated, and retained. Poor communication results in increased turnover, absenteeism, unsatisfied customer, and reduced innovation. There are 4 main types of communication in company. Upward communication. Information travels from the lower to upper levels. This could be in the form of employee feedback or satisfaction survey. It enables the leadership to understand the concerns of employees and thus make relevant changes. Downward communication. Communication travels from top management to its lower levels. Examples include instructions, policies, or trainings. A good example would be explaining tasks or company policy changes. Diagonal communication across departments on different levels, such as HR discussing new hires with the marketing manager. Horizontal communication between colleagues of the same level. Most often, this is a task coordination across department, for instance, a production manager and an accounting manager. Communication models can be formal and informal. The most common ones are via emails, over the phone, or in a meeting. Blogs and microblogs also increasingly used for departmental updates. Social networking sites like Facebook and Twitter, as in Alcatala's case, allows big groups of employees to keep in touch. This would facilitate all types of communication simultaneously. Intranets are basically internal portals for company news, policies, and employee data. An intranet can be defined as a private network used by an organization. Its primary purpose is to help employees securely communicate with each other, to store information, and help collaborate. It is through effective communication method that workers remain engaged and focused towards the achievement of organizational goals and objectives, hence harmonious and productive work environment. Communication style. We each have a way in which we communicate, and knowing this can greatly enhance our interaction with others. Many organizations tend to utilize tests with an aim of potentially identifying one's favorite style when it comes to relating communication. Knowing this will help to place people in best positioned positions. Our style of communication influences how well we get along with others, how candidly we put our point across, and how well we are likely to be understood by others. There are four basic types of communication: expressor, driver, collator, and analytical. Now remember, no one is locked into one style all the time. We often change depending on the situation. But knowing your dominant style and recognizing other style can help you communicate more effectively. Let's break them down. Expressor. The kind of a person gets excited easily. He welcomes challenges and relies on his intuition rather than his reason. You can spot them because they react impatiently with too much detail or long-winded explanations. They like to keep things moving quickly. Driver. Drivers are the take charge type. They are decisive and strong in their opinions and go straight to the point. Small talk is not their stuff. They just want to get things done. Relator. These are people that value relationship and positive regard. They want to feel close to others and be treated warmly. If you are going to communicate with a relator, then it is important to build a friendly and supportive environment, because that is what will work for them. Analytical. Analytical communicators, on the other hand, are all about structure and details. They like having a lot of questions to be answered and thinking through things before making decisions. They do not wish to be rushed, but instead they wish to take their time to make sure everything is done correctly. Through learning or understanding these types, we can know how to better interact with the others by using the right style in communication in the workplace or daily situations. It's about figuring out what works best for the person you're talking to. Different styles at times miscommunication in meetings. For example, an analytical communicator is a person who typically provides timelines and factual information in structured and efficient manner. A relator, on the other hand, values rapport and personal relation. These styles can conflict when put together. A relator may feel discounted if an analytical communicator doesn't take time for small talk or talking about personal issues, while an analytical communicator may become frustrated when the relator doesn't get to the point. These differences can lead to tension and frustration, which could further come out as low morale, low productivity, or even absenteeism. If not checked within the workplace, these differences can cause tension and frustration, and if unchecked, it could further cause low morale, decreased productivity, or absenteeism at work. Understanding and adapting to the differences in communication style is the way forward toward improving the interaction and avoiding these conflicts. People communicate in different styles, and sometimes that can create misunderstanding. For example, expressors are enthusiastic, emphasizing and sharing of one's emotion and excitement. Drivers are goal-oriented and may appear to be competitive or result-oriented. When these styles conflict, tension can result. For example, an expressor might feel that his or her enthusiasm is not taken into consideration, while a driver may be interested in the logistics and in control of a situation, hence communicating less efficiently. Also, most people use one of the following most of the time. Passive. Avoiding conflict and usually subordinates one's needs to others' needs. Aggressive. Asserting one's needs at the expense of others. Assertive. Balances getting one's own needs met with the respect for the right of others to have their own needs met. Communicates in a direct but fair manner. Passive-aggressive. One appears passive but through indirect means expresses frustrations that may be misunderstood or not resolved. An assertive style of communication is best, for in this one, there will be clarity and effectiveness in exchange while showing regard for the needs of both parties. Knowing these styles helps reduce potential or conflict and improves communication as a whole. Nonverbal communication. Effective communication extends beyond verbal exchanges to encompass body language, which plays a vital role in professional interactions, particularly during interviews. Proficiency interpreting nonverbal cues is essential for HR professionals and can significantly influence the success of an interview. Key components of body language. Facial expression provide insight into emotional states and reactions. Eye contact reflect engagement, confidence, and sincerity. Posture reveals openness or defensiveness through one's sitting or standing stance. Hand position indicates levels of comfort or discomfort. Tone of voice communicates emotional nuances through variations in pitch and volume. Gestures supplement verbal communication and can reinforce, contradict spoken words. Recognizing and controlling one's own body language as well as accurately interpreting others' nonverbal signals are crucial for effective communication. Mastery in these areas minimizes misunderstandings and enhances clarity and empathy in professional interactions. Challenges of digital communication and need to go face-to-face. One of the major limitations of email, text messaging, and other forms of digital communication is that it cannot reflect body language, which leads to much confusion and misinterpretation. It becomes hard to sense the sender's attitude, emotion, or even intent without the nonverbal cues, and message is more prone to misinterpretation. Key problems with digital communication. No nonverbal cues. There are no facial expression, gestures, or body language in a digital message which might mask the real meaning or emotional tone. Sarcasm veiled. Sarcasm and other subtle expression go undetected with the absence of vocal tone and facial expression. Over-reliance on emojis. Although smiley icons and other emojis do give clue about intentions, they hardly compensate for the lack of physical cues. Understanding cultural differences in body language. When communicating across cultures, remember that body language might mean different things in different places. For example, a gesture that's friendly in one country may be rude or offensive in another. Take the OK sign where you can create a circle with your thumb and pointer finger. While this gesture is meant to mean great or fine in the United States, it is offensive in Brazil, Germany, and Russia. In Japan, it means you're asking for change in coins. Similarly, our distance or closeness when standing to someone varies. What might be considered a normal person's space in one culture was either too close or far apart in another culture. Therefore, while traveling or working abroad, it's good to educate one about the place one visits regarding its custom and body language norms. This avoids miscommunication and ensures respect and effectiveness in communication. Training employees being sent for overseas assignment is very important for them to navigate these cultural differences smoothly.
Let us now proceed to the next one, which is listening. It is an important part of communication. While speaking and expressing thoughts are often emphasized, listening is equally, if not more important in ensuring meaningful interaction and understanding between individuals. So let us now go to the three main types of listening. So the first one is the competitive or combative listening. So it happens when we are focused on sharing our own point of view instead of listening to someone else. So the listener may interrupt or mentally prepare the response while the other person is speaking, which hinders genuine communication. The second one is the passive listening. So we are interested in hearing the other person and assume we hear and understand what the person says correctly without verifying. So while they do listen, they may not actively engage or confirm their understanding, which can lead to misunderstandings. The third one is the active listening. We are interested in what the other person has to say, and we are active in checking our understanding with the speaker. This might involve asking questions, paraphrasing, or summarizing what the speaker has to confirm that the message has been received accurately. Let us now discuss the management style. Management style ties in very closely with communication style. There isn't necessarily one management style that is better than another. They are simply different and might be used in a variety of situations. So, as the way a manager leads is often reflected in how they communicate with their team, both of these elements play a critical role in shaping the work environment, influencing team dynamics, and ultimately affecting the performance and motivation of employees. So, these are the different management styles. The first one is the task oriented style versus the people centered style. So, a manager with a task oriented style will focus on the technical or task aspects of the job. So, the concern for this manager is that employees know what is expected of them and have the tools needed to do their job, while ang mga people-oriented style is more concerned with the relationships in the workplace. The manager emphasizes the interpersonal relations as opposed to the task. So next are the participatory directing or teamwork styles. So participatory management style involves how the employee's assigned task fits into the bigger picture. This style will provide support and input where needed. As a result, the focus is on the task but also on the person and the relationships required to get the task done. If more hands on management is required, a directing management style might be appropriate. This style doesn't focus on the person, but rather focuses on getting the task done. Hence, it tends to be more of a task oriented style. A teamwork management style believes that there is a value or necessity in having people work in teams. As a result, this style tends to require a people centered approach, so relationships are most important, and assuming the individuals work well together, the task will be successfully accomplished. So, in summary, or to make it short, the participatory style balances task focus with employee involvement. The directing style ensures efficiency and control in urgent situations, and the teamwork style fosters collaboration and innovation through strong team relationships. Let us now proceed to autocratic, participative, and free rein styles. So, an autocratic style of management focuses on getting things done, and relationships are just secondary. This type of manager tends to tell people what to do and takes a my way or the highway approach. A participative style, on the other hand, constantly seeks input from the employees in the decision making process. Setting goals, making plans, and determining objectives are viewed as a group effort rather than the manager making all the decisions. Lastly, a free rein style is also known as laissez faire. It gives employees total freedom to make decisions on how things will get done. In summary, autocratic is task oriented with centralized control, best for urgent or high pressure situations. Participative encourages collaboration and shared decision making, ideal for fostering engagement and innovation. And free reign offers maximum autonomy to employees, suited for creative environments where independence is valued.
Path Goal Model for Leadership. This model, or the path goal theory, suggests that a leader defines goals and outlines a path for employees to achieve them. This involves clarifying tasks, employees' roles, and measuring success. The leader also provides guidance and coaching, removing obstacles. Satisfactions with leadership style motivates employees towards goals, skills, experience, and job environment also contribute to success. Another way we can view leadership is through the situational leadership model. This model, developed by Ken Blanchard, author of the 1 Minute Manager series of books, does a good job explaining how we might use one type of management style versus another. The model looks at three areas: the relationship behavior of the manager, the task behavior of the manager, and the readiness of employees. The relationship behavior means how supportive the manager needs to be in helping employees. Task behavior refers to the type of style the manager should use when managing employees based on their readiness level. Readiness includes the willingness and skills to perform the task at hand. Depending on where the employees fall in each of these areas, you might use in a different management style. First is the D4. High competence, high commitment means that experience at the job and comfortable with their own ability to do it well, may even be more skilled than the leader. Second is the D3. High competence, variable commitment means experience and capable, but may lack the confidence to go it alone or motivation to do it well or quickly. Next is D2. Some competence, low commitment may have some relevant skills but won't be able to do the job without help. The task or the situation may be new to them. The last is D1, low competence, high commitment, generally lacking the specific skills required for the job at hand but has the confidence and or motivation to tackle it. Based on the readiness and commitment of the employee, the leader can see what management style and the level of support the employee should experience. The first one is S1, telling or directing. High task focus, low relationship focus. Leaders define the roles and tasks of the follower and supervise them closely. Decisions are made by the leader and announced. So communication is largely one way. This style can be used with people who lack competence but are enthusiastic and committed and who need direction and supervision to get them started. Next is the S2, selling, coaching, high task focus, high relationship focus. Leaders still define roles and tasks but seek ideas and suggestions from the follower. Decisions remain the leader's prerogative, but communication is much more two-way. This approach can be used with people who have some competence but lack commitment and who need direction and supervision because they are still relatively inexperienced. These individuals may also need supports and praise to build their self-esteem and involvement in decision making to restore their commitment. Next is the participating or supporting. Low task focus, high relationship focus. Leaders pass day-to-day decisions such as tasks, allocations, processes to the follower. The leader facilitates and takes part in decision but control is given to the follower. This style can be used with people who have the necessary competence but lack confidence or motivation. These individuals may need little direction because of their skills, but support is necessary to boost their confidence and motivation. The last one is S4. Delegating, low task focus, low relationship focus. Leaders are still involved in decisions and problem solving, but control is with the follower. The follower decides when and how the leader will involve. This style would work with people who have both competence and commitment and who are able and willing to work on a project by themselves with little supervisions or support. Let's now discuss the chapter 10, which is the managing employee performance. Let's now discuss types of performance issues. One of the most difficult parts of managing others is not when they are doing a great job, it is when they are not doing a good job. In this section, we will address some examples of performance issues and how to handle them. The first one is constantly late or leaves early. While we know that flexible schedules can provide a work life balance, managing this flexible schedule is the key. Some employees may take advantage and instead of working at home, perform non work related tasks instead. Second, too much time spent doing personal things at work. Most companies have a policy about using computer or phone for personal use. Most companies, some personal use is fine, but it can become a problem if someone doesn't know where to draw the line. Next is inability to handle proprietary information. Many companies handle important client and patient informations. The ability to keep this information private for the protection of others is important to the success of the company. Next is the family's issues. Childcare issues, divorce, or other families challenges can cause absenteeism but also poor work quality. Absenteeism is defined as a habitual pattern of non-being at work. Next is drug and alcohol abuse. Next is non-performing. Sometimes employees are just not performing at their peak. Some causes may include family or personal issues, but oftentimes it can mean motivational issues or lack of tools and or ability to their current job. Next is conflict with management or other employees. Next is theft. Next is the ethical breaches. Number 10 is the harassment. And the last one is employee conduct outside the workplace. What influence performance? Performance issues can be disappointing for employees as it can take time to recruit, hire, and train them. These issues can be internal or external and can be related to personal factors like drug or alcohol abuse. Some of these factors can be internal while others may be external. Internal factors may include the following. Internal factors may include the following. The first one is career goals are not being met with the job. The second, there is a conflict with other employees or the manager. Third one is the goals expectation. The goals or expectations are not in the line with the employee's abilities. Next is the employee views unfairness in the workplace. Next is the employee manage time poorly. The last one is the employees is dissatisfied with the job. Next is some of the external factors may include the following. The employees doesn't have correct equipment or tools to perform the job. Second is the job design is incorrect. Third is external motivation factors are absent. Fourth, there is a lack of management support. And the last one is the employee skills and job are mismatched. So let's now proceed to defining discipline. To have an effective discipline process, rules and policies need to be in a place and communicated so all employees know the expectations. Here are some guidelines on creation of rules and organizational policies. The first one is all rules or procedures should be in a written document. Second, rules should be related to safety and productivity of the organization. Third, rules should be written clearly so no ambiguity occurs between different managers. Next is supervisors, managers, and human resources should communicate rules clearly in orientation, training, and via other methods. Next is rules should be revised periodically as the organization's need change. The last is, of course, there is a balance between too many rules and giving employees freedom to do their work. However, the point of written rules is to maintain the consistency.
Employee separation. Employee separation refers to situations where an employee leaves a company. This can happen in a few different ways. First, resignation. The employee decides to leave on their own and formally resigns. They follow the company's process, such as giving notice before they leave. When an employee resigns, they usually send a formal resignation email to their manager. HR then may schedule an exit interview to discuss the reasons for leaving. If HR thinks the issues can be resolved, they might talk to the manager about whether to accept the resignation. If accepted, the employee and manager will plan how to handle the remaining work. Some employees may leave immediately, while others might stay to finish a project. Typically, 2 weeks notice is standard for resignations. Second, termination. The company decides to let the employee go, often due to issues like poor performance or misconduct. This is usually a decision made by the employer. When an employee is terminated, specific steps must be followed, different from a resignation. First, documentation, like performance appraisals and warning, is needed to support the decision. It is important to ensure these appraisals are fair and accurate. If the discipline process has been followed correctly, the termination should not come as a surprise to the employee. Typically, the manager and HR will meet the employee to communicate the decision, delivering the news with compassion but clearly. Depending on the situation, the employee may receive a severance package which can include pay, benefits, or other compensation to help them while they look for a new job. HR usually works with the manager to develop this package. Some consideration in developing a severance package, preferably before anyone is terminated, might include the following. First, how the severance will be paid. Example, lump sum or in equal increments. Second, which situations will pay a severance and which will not. For example, if an employee is terminated for violation of a sexual harassment policy, is a severance still paid? Third, a formula for how severance will be paid based on work group, years with the organization, and etc. Fourth, legal documents such as legal releases and non-compete agreements. Fifth, how accrued vacation and/or sick leave will be paid, if at all. And the last one, absconding. The employee leaves the job without informing the company or following the usual resignation process. They simply stop coming to work without any notice. The last topic that we should discuss in this section is the case of an absconded employee. If an employee stops showing up to work, a good effort to contact this person should be the first priority. If after 3 days this person has not been reachable and has not contacted the company, it would be prudent to stop pay and seek legal help to recover any company items he or she has, such as laptops or parking passes. So when employees leave, it can be costly for the company. For example, in the second quarter of 2011, Halliburton, a large company, reported that it spent $8 million on costs related to employees leaving. This cost can include things like paying out unused vacation days, hiring and training replacements, and dealing with the disruption caused by the employee's departure. Right-sizing and layoffs. Right-sizing refers to the process of reducing the total size of employees to ultimately save on cost. Downsizing ultimately means the same thing as right-sizing, but the usage of the word has changed in that right-sizing seems to define the organization's goals better, which would be to reduce staff to save money or right-size. When a company decides to right-size and ultimately engage in layoffs, some aspects should be considered. First, is the downturn just temporary? Laying off staff only to need them again soon can be costly. Second, are there other ways to cut costs instead of layoffs? It might be better to reduce expenses elsewhere. Finally, offering options like temporary sabbatical, voluntary retirement, part-time positions, or even temporary pay cuts could keep help valuable employees while still reducing costs. These alternatives can benefit both the company and the employees, even if it's just for a short time. When a company needs to cut full-time employees to reduce costs, HR should be involved to ensure everything is done legally and ethically. First, Clear reasons for layoffs should be communicated, and fair criteria for deciding who will be laid off should be established. This helps make the process more fair and transparent. After setting the criteria, management decides who meets them and who will be laid off. Severance packages should be discussed, and employees receiving them should sign a release form. A clear communication plan is crucial. Start with an email to all employees about the upcoming layoffs, then speak with affected employees individually. Finally, announce which positions were cut. Throughout the process, it is important to respect the dignity of those being laid off, as they are losing their jobs due to circumstances, not their performance. Employee rights. Employee rights is defined as the ability to receive fair treatment from employers. This section will discuss employee rights surrounding job protection, privacy, and unionization. So when we say employee rights, these are basic protections and entitlements that workers have in the workplace. These rights ensure the employees are treated fairly and include things like: first, fair pay. So employees have the right to be paid at least the minimum wage and receive overtime pay if they work extra hours. Second, safe working conditions. So employees have the right to work in a safe environment where risks to their health and safety are minimized. Third, freedom from discrimination. Employees have the right to be treated equally without discrimination based on race, gender, religion, age, disability, or other protected characteristics. Fourth, privacy. Employees have certain rights to privacy in the workplace, like not having their personal information shared without consent. Fifth, time off. Employees have the right to take time off for specific reasons, such as vacations, illness, or family emergencies, depending on the laws in their country. And last, right to join a union. Employees have the right to join or form a union to collectively bargain for better wages, benefits, and working conditions. Job protection rights. If HR doesn't understand or properly manage employee rights, lawsuits are sure to follow. It is the HR professional's job to understand and protect the rights of employees. In the United States, the Employment at Will Principle, or EAW, is the right for an employer to fire an employee or an employee to leave an organization at any time, without any specific cause. The EAW principle gives both the employee and employer freedom to terminate the relationship at any time. So there are three main exceptions to this principle, and whether they are accepted is up to the various states. The first one is a public policy exception. It means an employer can fire an employee if it goes against state laws or important public rules. For example, in a case in Pennsylvania, a court ruled that firing an employee for refusing to take a drug test, if it invades their privacy, might be against state law. Public policy exception can also apply if an employee is fired for not breaking state or federal laws. The second one is the implied contract exception. It means an employee can claim job security if the employer's action or statement suggested it, even if there is no formal written contract. For example, in the case of Honda, an employee argued that despite being at will, Honda's promises and policies about job security and performance created an implied contract. The employee showed that Honda's emphasis on good attendance and quality work, along with the handbook's language about job security, supported her claim. And the third one is the good faith and fair dealing exception. It means that an employee can argue they were treated unfairly if their dismissal was unjust or done to avoid paying them what they are owed. This exception is less common but can apply in cases where an employee is fired or moved to stop them from getting commissions, misled about promotions or raises, or pushed to quit by making their job unbearable. If one of the exceptions to employment at will can be proven, a wrongful discharge claim might arise. Unlike many countries like France and the UK, where employers must show just cause to fire someone, the US follows an employment at will policy. This means employers can fire employees without needing a reason, but it also means they must be ready to defend their decision to avoid wrongful discharge claims. Employees are protected if they report illegal or unethical actions by their organization, known as whistleblowing. This protection was established in 1899 and strengthened by the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002. Many companies have whistleblowing policies and systems in place to allow employees to report such issues safely. Employees may be protected by an implied contract, so HR professionals and managers should avoid suggesting that an employee has a guaranteed contract. To prevent this, many organizations have employment at will policies and ask employees to sign them, making it clear that there is no contract guaranteeing job security. A constructive discharge happens when an employee resigns because their work conditions were so unbearable they felt they had no other option. For instance, if an employee quits due to severe sexual harassment, he would need to prove both the harassment and that it was bad enough to force him to leave. If the court agrees, the employee could receive back pay and other compensation. The Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act or WARN requires companies with over 100 employees to give at least 60 days notice before closing or laying off 50 or more full-time employees. This rule doesn't apply in unexpected situations. If a company breaks this law, they may have to pay back wages to affected employees, except those who have been with the company. Retaliatory discharge is when an employee is punished for doing something legally protected, like filing a discrimination complaint or opposing illegal practices. For example, if an employee is treated badly for filing a workers' compensation claim, that is retaliatory discharge. Privacy rights. Technology allows employers to monitor employees' work activities more easily, but it is important to have a policy in place first. There is a debate over whether employers should monitor employees' online activities, including work emails, websites visited on company devices, and even personal online activity. Digital Footprints Incorporated tracks employees' digital activities and provides report to the company by analyzing communication patterns and word usage. This can help detect violations like sexual harassment. However, since the software is expensive, it is important to consider if it is worth the investment before using it. Another privacy concern is monitoring employees' posts on social media. Companies like Social Sentry can be hired to track what employees post on sites like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. However, lawyers advise that this monitoring should only happen if the employee agrees. Sometimes, employers don't need a monitoring service to see what employees post, and employees can even lose their job for comments unrelated to their workplace. For example, Chad Scott, a sports update host, was fired after tweeting a complaint about Delta Airlines, a sponsor of his station. The U.S. Patriot Act allows the government to access private employee information when investigating possible terrorist activity. To address this, companies should have a clear policy and possibly a signed waiver from employees acknowledging that their activities may be monitored and information shared with the government under the Patriot Act. In some states, employees have the right to view and correct their personal files. Medical and disability information must be kept separate from work files, as required by the Americans with Disabilities Act. Additionally, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act requires health information to be kept private. Drug testing and privacy are three key issues. Companies often test for drugs to ensure safety or meet insurance requirements. The Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988 requires federal contractors and grantees to maintain a drug-free environment. Under the ADA, testing for illegal drugs is not considered a medical exam and is allowed, but people using illegal drugs are not protected. However, people using medications for disabilities are allowed to take them. In the case of Bates v. Dura Automotive Systems, an auto parts manufacturer tested for drugs due to high accident rates. Employees were fired for using prescription drugs that could impair them and sued, claiming it violated ADA laws. The court ruled against them because they were not covered by ADA laws as they didn't have documented disabilities. In companies that operate heavy machinery, monthly drug tests might be required. The Omnibus Transportation Employee Testing Act of 1991 mandates drug testing for transportation jobs like airlines and trucking. Medical marijuana is a new issue in states where it is legal. If an employee tests positive for marijuana, it is unclear if asking them to prove it is for medical use would violate HIPAA privacy laws. Labor unions. A union is a group of employees that negotiates with employers on their behalf. Labor unions have been part of the U.S. workplace since the late 1920s. The Wagner Act of 1935 improved labor relations by making it illegal for employers to interfere with unions or discriminate against union members. The National Labor Relations Board enforces this law. By the 1940s, with 9 million union members, the Taft-Hartley Act was introduced to ensure fair practices by unions. Unions give groups of employees collective bargaining power so they can negotiate things like salary, health, benefits, and working hours together rather than individually. People often join unions if they feel they are being treated unfairly by their employer, and they believe unions can help them get better wages and benefits. Many employers try to prevent unionization because they believe it's not in the organization's best interest. The Taft-Hartley Act allows employers to share their views on unions but prohibits them from threatening employees with job loss or other penalties for unionizing. Common points employers might raise include: first, less ability to deal more informally with the organization. Second, possibility of strikes. Third, payment of union dues by employees. And fourth, emphasis on what positive aspects the If employees unionize, managers and HR professionals negotiate with the union to create a contract that sets the terms of employment. Being well prepared is key, including reviewing past contracts and anticipating the union's demands. Interest-based bargaining, where both sides discuss mutual interest rather than just making demands, can help reach a win-win agreement. Once a contract is agreed upon, the union members vote to accept it. If accepted, HR must implement the new terms such as pay changes and may need to create new policies. HR also handle grievances, formal complaints about contract issues. The process usually starts with discussions with supervisors and a union rep, and can also involve formal complaints and written responses from management. For example, in 2011, 58 out of 140 proposed dismissal of air traffic controllers were either rescinded or reduced due to due process protections. Federal workers can challenge disciplinary actions through the Merit System Protection.
The role of the performance appraisal in discipline. Besides the written rules, each individual job analysis should have rules and policies that apply to that specific job. We discussed performance appraisal in further detail but it is worth a mention here as well. The performance appraisal is a systematic process to evaluate employees on at least an annual basis. The organization's performance appraisal and general rules and policies should be the tools that measure the employee's overall performance. So if an employee breaks the rules or does not meet expectations of the performance appraisal, the performance issue model, which we will discuss next, can be used to correct the behavior. So performance appraisals are essential for the growth of company and the employee. It helps the company to find out whether the employee is being productive or is a liability. It also helps the employee find out where his or her career is heading. It is an essential part of HR management. Performance issue model. Performance issues can be categorized into five areas: mandated, single incidents, and a policy. Mandated issues are serious and require immediate attention, such as privacy violations or safety procedures. A written policy detailing how to handle these issues is crucial for consistency. Single incidents such as miscommunication or budget overruns can be resolved through casual conversation and coaching. These issues can be seen as develop opportunities for employees, allowing for coaching and collaboration to address and prevent further issues. Developing a policy for handling these types of performance issues is essential for maintaining fairness and consistency. Mandated issue. A command or authorization to act in a particular way on a public issue given by the electorate to its representative. For example, the president had a clear mandate to end the war. Single incident, a singular act or event that occur at the same location, date, and time that give rise to multiple violations of state or federal laws. Multiple acts or events are not a single incident. Behavior pattern, a recurrent way of acting by an individual or group toward a given object or in a given situation. Persistent pattern, a sustained or recurring pattern of practice. Sample 1, sample 2, save, copy. Disciplinary intervention, suspension policies, teacher proactive time out, contracts, daily communication, debriefing, and family group conferences. The staff and administration of a school need to carefully consider the use of these procedures and develop policies for their use. So performance issues can develop into behavior patterns when incidents are not immediately corrected. These can occur when employees don't realize they're wrong. If the employee has been corrected but continues to exhibit the same behavior, it's a persistent pattern. If the issue persists, it may be due to lack of training or skills. If the issue persists, progressive discipline may be considered before initiating an employee separation. Investigation is crucial before implementing discipline. Investigation of performance issues. HR professionals often investigate performance issues in employees, training managers on documenting failings. Proper documentation includes the date, time, location, description, notes, improvement plan, next steps, and signatures from both managers and employees. After documentation, managers and employees conduct investigative interviews to ensure awareness of the discipline issue and allow employees to explain their side of the story. In unionized organizations, employees have the right to union representation during these interviews, known as interest based bargaining. Recently, Wingardium rights were protected when Alonso and Carlos Iron Works stopped threatening union's representatives during investigate interviews. Options for handling performance issues. The progressive discipline process is a final phase in addressing employee problems involving a series of corrective actions on non-performance issues. This process is useful for non-serious offenses like theft and should be documented and applied to all employees. Steps include unofficial verbal warnings, official written warnings, improvement plan suspensions, and termination. Alternative dispute resolution. Alternative dispute resolution, or ADR, is a method used to resolve disputes, performance issues, and terminations. It involves an unbiased third party assisting parties in reaching an agreement, unlike mediation, which is not binding. ADR offers lower cost and flexibility compared to court proceedings. Organizations can use step review systems, peer resolution systems, or ombudsman systems to address employee complaints or discipline issues. A step review system involves reviewing issues by higher management levels, while a peer review system involved committee reviewing complaints and rendering decisions. Thank you for listening.